And that is it for my housekeeping items before we begin.
Lisa, just a question, and to Irv too. If in the recording, are the breakout rooms also recorded or not?
No,
Okay, so if they're not interested in being recorded, they can still participate actively in the breakout rooms, and that does not get recorded.
that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
That's a great clarifying question. Thank you so much. We've got 4 goals for this evening that we've articulated. In the next 1.5 hours, we want you to understand what the term reassurance actually means. We want to explore why students and adults actually need reassurance. We are the only species on Earth that seems to need reassurance. We want to recognize particularly how verbal and nonverbal communications impact our sense of safety in the world and with other people. And finally, we want to discuss concrete strategies for offering reassurance during challenging times. So those are our goals tonight.
And the way that we actually show up for something and how we intend to be for a workshop is very important. It lets you know, like, yes, I intended to really pay attention and get some takeaways from this tonight. For when you're not that way, you're like, oh, I wanted to pay attention to this. Or when you are doing what you wanted to do, you can reinforce yourself for that. So a couple examples are, you might have the intention to listen to others' ideas so that you can apply those ideas to your own situation. Or I intend to leave this workshop with an idea of what I can say to a young person in my life in order to reassure him or her. So I'd like you to think about how you want to be for this workshop tonight, and just put your intention into the chat so you can see and others can see what your intention is. Thanks, Allie. It helps to know the ages of the students or the children that you want to reinsure. Thanks, Lisa. Give you another. Good, we've got some different age students here. From kindergarten, looks like to high school. That's good to know. And I think it helps when you set the intention, if it's to being able to reassure grandchildren, you will know in your heart when we're finished with the workshop, I'm ready to do that, or I still have some questions that I should ask in order to be able to meet the intention that I set. And as Lisa mentioned, we're going to be looking at the chat, but we're wondering, there must have been something that attracted you to this workshop. We've got almost 30 people here. Is there a specific question that you have that you would like answered tonight? So maybe a question might be, what are the differences between assurance and reassurance? They look and sound the same. Or how can I be a good role model for reassurance for the young people in my world? So think about a question that you would like to have answered. So Amy, for example, said, what can I say to a young person who's in grade 5 in my life to reassure them? So think about a question that you would like to have answered during the next hour and 15 minutes and put that in the chat. And Lisa and I will use those to make sure that we respond to them. And if we can't tonight, we will promise to get back to you with the information if we don't cover it tonight. So type your question that you would like answered into the chat? Yes, we all need reassurance. Yeah, Donna Maria. Thank you, Ellie. Like, how do you give comfort when you don't have the answers to any of their questions? And thanks, Lisa. Give you another 30 seconds if you would like to put one in. And again, as Lisa mentioned, at any time during the session, if a question pops into your head, we want to know about it. So feel free to put it into the chat. Great. Thank you, everyone. So Lisa, why does this topic matter?
It's a good question. And I think the answer is quite simple. We need to be able to reassure ourselves and others in order to feel safe in the world. Without reassurance, we feel alone, unloved, and often unworthy. But reassurance is the experience through which we give and receive from others the confirmation that we're part of something bigger than ourselves, and that we've got value, and that we matter. And that forms our identity. And when we find meaning in and through our identity, we have value, which translates directly into feelings of happiness and well-being for us. And it holds true quite marvelously at all ages. So providing reassurance paves the path to well-being and happiness, even in good times, but especially during challenging times, when we and our children are apt to feel alone, unloved, and unworthy.
So let's think about during uncertain times, and Lisa and I debated whether to only talk about COVID, because we also realized that before COVID and after COVID, students are going to need reassurance and our children are going to need reassurance for other things other than the pandemic. So think about what negative feelings and thoughts might student be having right now, and use the chat function, thinking about people in your class or maybe your grandchildren or someone in your life. What thoughts and feelings do you think they're having right now? So you can put those in the chat. So will this pandemic really ever end? And things will never be normal again. Will the pandemic take away all those that we care about? When can I play with my friends again? I'm stuck in this house all day and night with people who don't understand or even like me. When can I go back to school? Will we have to go remote again? Yeah, 100 kindergarten students, they don't know what real school or school is really like for them, or they're feeling anger because it's been over a year that we've been like this. I don't like this. I want this to end. Loneliness and the fear of the unknown. When will things go back to normal, and when can we have a kickball tournament? And I was listening and talking with a principal who said, I will never take for granted just being in the building again with the students and all the staff. Will my friends still like me when I haven't seen them for a year? A lot to catch up on. When can we throw away my mask? Will I ever be able to go on a date? Sadness in kids as well as adults. Anxious about their friends at school, those that are remote, and will they still play together? When will school look normal again? When can we play sports without wearing masks? Okay, give you another 30 seconds in case anyone hasn't had a chance to respond but would like to. Well, when Lisa and I, a couple months ago, started thinking about what we thought the young people in our life were thinking and feeling, we thought they would worry about their family's health. They might worry about their own health. They would worry about the health of their friends, worried about playtime, worried about doing well at school. And I know that in some districts, we're not sure where about 30% of the kids are. And they have just a general worry about things they can't control. And here's where I think it's important to think about, there's a phenomenon called social proof. And the principle of social proof, and this is probably the part that Lisa was referring to when she said it was going to get academic, is that when we don't know how to act, we look to others around us to see how to act. Like when you hear a loud noise, you look around to others and you think, should I be worried about this? And if everyone else looks concerned, then you are more apt to look concerned because there's this emotional contagion. And there are two times when people look to others for that social proof to see how to react. One is when it's a new situation like the pandemic. And the other one is you look to people who are like you, other teachers, other women, other adults, or other kids to see how should we respond to this. And some of the ways that this happens in life, you want to do what others are doing. So they put on things like canned laughter on TV shows, and people will think things are funnier because they hear others laughing. Or if you've ever walked down the street and seen somebody looking up, everybody else wants to look up and see what's up there that someone's concerned about. And we evolved over thousands and millions of years developing mirror neurons, which helps us to know what others are thinking and feeling. And not only in real life, but Lisa and I were talking that even though she and I have never met or only met virtually, that you do have a sense when you're looking at a screen or listening to the radio or watching a television or a movie, those mirror neurons and what other people are doing, you can react to it, which is why I cry at certain parts in the movie, or you feel empathy for different people. So it's an important skill that we have as adults and as children to look at others and feel what they're feeling and look to others for how we should behave. Sometimes that feeling manifests itself in behavior. Lisa, can you talk a little bit about that?
I'm I'm sure you all know, but first of all, I want to qualify, I haven't made Irv cry yet, so just for the record. But oftentimes what we feel on the inside, we express externally. So our thoughts and our feelings become manifest in very tangible ways. So in other words, we express our feelings that only we feel in our actions that other people see. And usually this process is quite unintentional and we're not even aware that we're doing it. When we're happy, we don't seem to do this as much, but when we're happy or when children are happy, their behaviors tend to be positive, normal behaviors that we don't pay lots of attention to. But when we're sad or angry or we're in a negative emotional state, our behaviors become very negative and they are very obvious to the people around us. And this is something called, quite simply, expressive behavior. So what we feel on the inside, we act out externally without being aware or conscious that we're doing it most of the time. And it's really important, and I want to talk about it because expressive behavior is a means of survival. It's our connection with our tribe, for lack of a better word. We do it to show that we need help. We do it to show when we need help. We act in positive ways to show that we are available to help and we're available to support. We act in angry ways and smash things around to warn people around us not to come close, that we're not in a good place. And then we can be kind and loving and hugging to encourage people to come towards us. So expressive behavior is key to survival, not just of the individual, but groups at large. And in children, if we're going to talk about negative behavior, what do we know from their worries? How do we see their negative feelings and thoughts manifest themselves in their behavior? And I'm sure you could probably write this list in a much more cohesive way than I ever did. But we might find that students are actually verbally reassurance seeking. Is grandpa going to be okay? Or you might see younger children who are very reluctant to separate from their parents, either at the bus stop or when their parents let them go in the morning into the Zoom room. We see that many children experience real physical symptoms like stomach aches and headaches and body aches during uncertain times. You'll see many of the children wanting to go to the nurse's office, quite a lot more, I think. You're going to see a lot of moodiness and irritability. In younger children, you'll see tantrums or meltdowns. And in older children, you might not see meltdowns, but you will see increased aggression, verbal and physical. Children are going to have a much harder time falling asleep and staying asleep. And while you might not be aware of that, what you will be aware of is that when they come into school or when they're on Zoom, they are unable to concentrate on their work. They might look disheveled. Their hair might not be brushed. They might be irritable. All of these factors result from lack of sleep. And I think Irv spoke about one of the things that schools are seeing, that students are not showing up and they're not participating. So these are all ways that students are showing their interior feelings in an exterior way. So think about yourself. We're adults, fairly educated, probably quite brilliant. How do worries manifest themselves in your behavior? Now you've got a lot of years of experience and control, unlike a child. When you're in a bad place, how are you likely to behave? What are you likely to do to show others around you that you're not in a good place?
So again, let's use the chat and think of an example of how do you quote unquote show the people around you with your expressive behavior that you are unhappy.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be unhappy. It could be angry.
So get short, snap at them, awful eyes. I either talk too much or not at all. Radio silence, crying, I get disconnected. I just walk away, I withdraw. Again, withdraw. I get quiet, but it doesn't happen often. I get quiet, cry or withdraw, or I walk away. I may be quick with a person or clam up. And it's interesting as we think about these behaviors in ourselves, that now we maybe can begin to recognize and look at a child who doesn't show up because of their being anxious in a different way when we ourselves either don't talk out or we get snappy as they do. I just don't participate in everyday activity, or it shows on my face even when I don't know it. people can read it. I cry and I get quiet.
So,
Go ahead, Lisa.
no, go ahead.
No, so I was thinking, sometimes we look at children and have a hard time understanding why they're acting the way they are. All behavior has meaning. As adults, we need to figure out what that behavior that they're expressing means, and thinking about our own behavior sometimes can provide us with insights.
Irv is so articulate, it kind of puts me to shame. He takes the words out of my mouth. But when we're not in a good emotional space, it's natural for us to want and need support and reassurance from people around us, especially people we love. But to do this, we first have got to communicate those needs in such a way that we're understood correctly. And in children in particular, what we find is that they communicate their needs in two ways, verbally and non-verbally. And it's important that as educators, we're aware of the distinctions of this, and that we also communicate with them both verbally and non-verbally. Because at the end of the day, the words we use and our gestures and our body language will convey to the students whether we're completely disinterested in their well-being or whether we're here to give them reassurance. So this is a slide that I actually want to spend quite a lot of time on. The smallest gestures have got the greatest consequences for our well-being. I want you to bear with me as I'm going to ramble a bit.
Go ahead.
Oh, I want to hear your joke. Go for it.
No, I was going to talk about the activity, but I thought you were done, Lisa. Go ahead.
Our ability to survive and thrive as individuals and as a group or as a community depends on how well we communicate with people around us. Our communication is fundamental to our well-being and happiness. And human communication, as we spoke about, happens in two ways. The first way is verbal. So the words we use, the sentences we structure, and the tone we use. But only 7% of all of human communication is verbal. I'm gonna let that give you a moment to reflect on that. No matter where we come from on this earth, whether we're from China or a country in Africa or Europe, only 7% of our communication is verbal. The other 93% of the way we communicate is nonverbal. So it's through our actions, through what we do, through the gestures we make with our body, and through other ways we express our body language. 93% of the way we communicate is nonverbal. So if you're in a room with the most eloquent, articulate person who's got a massive vocabulary, still only 7% of the way they communicate with you is going to be through their words. The rest of the meaning you're going to be picking up through their nonverbal cues. So take a step back and think about the implications of this as yourself as professionals at work. As a professional, I'm quite confident that you're aware of the words you choose when you speak to people, and you're probably intentional and purposeful. The same with your sentence structure. You probably think thoughtfully and speak eloquently in complete sentences. You're aware of your sentence structure. And I'm sure that you're all aware of your tone when you're talking. We're in control of 7% of our communication, but we're less aware and less in control of the other 93% of what we say to people. And I want to give you 2 examples to illustrate this. And I'm going to hand off to Irv for a moment.
On your screen at the very top, there's a little button that says view options. And so you can either look at the gallery or you can look at the speaker view. And Lisa has requested that you change that to speaker view. So you're going to focus on her. I'm going to pull off the slide deck so you can just focus on Lisa for this next 7 or 8 minutes for these activities. For part of the activity, she's going to ask you to close your eyes. So if you're more comfortable closing your eyes with your camera, with the video stopped, you can go ahead and stop it, but you'll still be able to hear Lisa's voice. After she takes us through these kind of very neat activities, then I'll put the slideshow back up. So Lisa,
All right.
take it away.
I will. And Ali, I see your question in the chat, and I promise you we'll get to concrete ideas in just a few minutes. So if you can just.
Yeah, no, and I can absolutely wait. I didn't want to interrupt your flow. That's the circle that's going in my head. And if I don't get it down, it'll be gone forever.
Okay, that is good. You've got your expressive behavior happening here through your 7% verbal communication. So I want to give you 2 examples to illustrate how we are unaware of how small gestures impact the way we feel. And for this activity, I'm going to use us as adults, not a child's perspective. So in a minute, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and I'm going to walk you through a situation. And it's a very simple situation. You're simply going to be meeting a stranger. So this is a stranger, somebody who you haven't met before. And it's going to be your choice of stranger at a location of your choice. And in this walkthrough, you're going to be doing one thing. You're going to be shaking their hand. That's it. The gesture that I'm asking you to think about is a handshake with a stranger. I picked the handshake because it's the smallest of everyday gestures. So think back over the past however many years that you've been giving handshakes and think about all the number of handshakes that you've given without being aware of it. In the Western world, it's the most acceptable form of a greeting. You shake hands with people in Europe, in France, in Germany, in England, and then if you go to countries in Africa, you'll shake hands. If you go to the Middle East, you'll shake hands. There may be nuances, but ultimately it's the most recognizable gesture of greeting. Now the handshake, interestingly, dates all the way back in a documented way to the Greeks and the Romans, which is about 2,000 years ago. And I want to just give you one sentence to think about before we start. Have you ever heard the expression, somebody has got the upper hand? It comes from the Western handshake. All right, but before I go into all the details, I'm going to walk you through this scenario. So here we go. If you're comfortable, close your eyes. And I want you to imagine that you're in a setting of your choice. It could be in your office at work. It could be in a classroom. It could be in the gym. It could be somewhere wonderful on holiday. It could be a social function. It could be in the supermarket. It could be anywhere you want. But imagine your setting for meeting a stranger. All right. After you've got yourself in your setting, I want you to imagine yourself being very specifically present in the setting. So think about what you're wearing. Think about, are you warm? Are you cold? Think about maybe the time of day even. What kind of mood are you in? Are you anxious to get home? Are you happy to be where you are? Are you wishing you were somewhere else? So establish yourself in this setting. And now I want you to imagine your stranger, somebody who you don't know. Think about their gender. Are they male or female or trans? Think about their dress. What are they wearing? Think about their race, their ethnicity, their bearing, their carriage. Just imagine your stranger. And now I want you to step forward to shake their hand. Keeping your eyes shut, in the next 5 seconds, because that's how long a Western handshake takes, 6 defining things are going to happen that you're not going to be consciously aware of. As you both step forward, one of you or your stranger, is going to reach out a fraction of a second faster than the other. Whoever does this, whoever reaches out first, will be the one who sees themselves as more important, more powerful, more dominant, and more in control of the dynamics of your relationship with them. But you're not going to be consciously aware of this, that they or you are reaching out a fraction of a second before you. The second thing that's going to happen is, as soon as you initiate skin to skin contact, both of your bodies are going to release a hormone called oxytocin. And oxytocin is the bonding hormone. And it's going to determine how deeply or how shallowly you're going to bond with this stranger. But you're not going to be aware of this consciously. But check your feelings for a minute. What are you feeling? Are you feeling comfortable? Are you feeling a little bit of anxiety? Are you feeling loved? Are you feeling you really don't want to be in this situation? Think about your feelings. The third thing that's going to happen that you're not going to be aware of is that your brain is going to direct your eyes to notice the hands and the fingers of your stranger, and they're going to notice your hands. We're hardwired to do this. It doesn't matter what culture we live in. When we meet a stranger, we look at the other person's hands. And this is primarily a primal survival instinct. And what we're really doing, although we're not aware that we're doing it, is we're looking to see if the other person is holding something that could be threatening to us, a stick, for example. But you're not going to be aware that you're looking at their hands. So check your feelings. What are you feeling that you might not be able to articulate? Fourthly, we're still well within our 5 seconds. As you clasp hands with your stranger, the dynamics of your relationship with them are being cemented. So one of you is going to have your hand, your palm, slightly slanting down, facing down towards the floor or the earth. And the one of you who does this is more dominant. And the one of you who does this perceives yourself to be more important, more in control of the relationship. The other, it could be you or it could be your partner, will have your palm slanting up. And if you're in this position, you see yourself as less dominant, less important, less in control of the relationship. The other alternative is that when you reach hands, when you clasp hands, you both have your hands at the same angle and you both exert equal pressure. This is called the grip of equals. You recognize on some subconscious level that you're an equal to this person. You see themselves as your equal. The absolute worst case scenario of a handshake is that you go in for a grip of equals and your stranger takes your wrist and turns their palm to face down, effectively telling you that you're not his or her equal and that you made a big assumption in assuming that you were their equal. So check your feelings. You've had 5 seconds of a handshake. In sum, in this 5 seconds of a handshake, and you can open your eyes now if you want, the smallest of all gestures, the dynamics of your relationship have been set. And that's not to suggest they won't change, they could change, but initially in those first 5 seconds, all this information has been conveyed that you're not aware of. And in all likelihood, you've only shared 4 words with each other. My name is Irv. So as you step out of the handshake, become aware and think about what you're feeling. You might be feeling quite good if you had a grip of equals, or possibly if you were quite dominant. You might not be feeling so confident if you were less dominant in the handshake. 90% of men shake hands with the dominant position. That means 70% of women, when they shake hands with a stranger of any gender, when they initiate the handshake, it tends to be more submissive. So think about how a handshake translates itself into the way you feel about yourself and the way you feel about a relationship with this other person. All right. So the second example that I want to give you is actually quite a lot faster. And I want to use another greeting gesture, but this time it's a greeting gesture from India. And to get us started, I just want to share with you that Hindus believe that God or the divine is present in each and every one of us, actually in every living being. So all of us have got a living God or goddess or divine principle inside of us. So you need to know that going into this gesture. All right, then. So if you're ready, close your eyes, and I'm going to walk you through another small greeting. Imagine your setting right where you were before. Same room, same space. Imagine yourself being back in that same setting. You're wearing the same clothes, feeling the same feelings. And now imagine your stranger is back in the room, but you've never met your stranger before. You're standing within arm's reach of them. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to look up and make direct eye contact with them. And I want you to hold that eye contact for just a second, a fraction of a second. And then I want you to take the palms of both of your hands and put them together in front of your chest, almost like you're praying in the Western world. And when your hands are together, I want you to lower your gaze and lean in a slight bow towards your stranger. And as you lean in towards them with your eyes lowered, they're going to be leaning in towards you with their eyes lowered. And as you come out of this bow with your hands still together, you're going to say, and you can say it in your head or out loud, it's all good with me, Namaste. In these 5 seconds, and with one word, the dynamics of your relationships has been cemented with this stranger. In Hindi, Namaste means the divine God or goddess in me recognizes and bows to the divine God or goddess in you. So that was your gesture. And I want you to now think about, how do you feel now walking away from this other person? How is your relationship different? What are you feeling about yourself after you've been greeted in this way? So you can open your eyes now. And now that we've completed the exercise, I want to affirm that I'm not suggesting that one gesture of greeting is any better than another gesture of greeting. I'm not making any cultural values here, but it's simply to illustrate how one small gesture that we're not aware of, that we're not thinking about, determines the dynamics of a relationship and determines a huge extent of our emotion, and we're not aware of it. So coming full circle, 7% of the way we communicate with others and with children is verbal. 93% of the way we communicate is nonverbal. And as you know, children have a much, much smaller capacity to use and process verbal communication compared to adults. But children, just like adults, are hardwired to understand nonverbal communication. They're going to know, based on your gestures, based on your body language and the actions you take, if you're providing reassurance to them or if you're disinterested. And just a note of humor, we never shake hands with children. And the reason we don't shake hands with children is because in the Western world, the handshake is a gesture of power, and we don't even realize it. So before we actually start talking about concrete strategies, Ali, this next part is for you. I want to encourage you to be more aware of your body language and be more purposeful in how you use it. Because the smallest of our gestures have the greatest of consequences in determining how the people around us feel emotionally. Handing off.
Great, thanks, Lisa. I enjoyed that activity every time I've done it. And Ellie, I too see your little wheel spinning. We're almost there, but Lisa and I wanted to make the distinction between strategies for reassurance and assurance. And we've come down to thinking that assurance is kind of an active declaration where you are saying that there will be some outcome or something will be true that is outside of your control. And the story that comes right to mind for me, I also teach in the doctoral program at Southern New Hampshire University. And about 3 years ago, one of my doctoral students was experiencing headaches. And she was very concerned about it, but she said, everybody tells me it's nothing, but I think I should go and have it tested. And I said, well, who's reassuring you that it's nothing? She said, well, people at school and my family. And she went and had it tested, and it turned out that she had brain cancer. And the people who were assuring her it was nothing had no basis on which to make that assurance. But the time I was able to spend with her before she passed away, I think was more reassuring, knowing that she wasn't alone and there were people with her when she went through this experience. So I don't know if you ever had the experience where someone has promised you something, that there was going to be a certain outcome, that you were definitely going to ace the test or get into that school or win the lottery. But are there drawbacks that you can think of for when people tell you or guarantee an outcome that's outside of their control? And you can either put it in the chat or just unmute yourself. What's the problem with telling people something's going to happen or there will be an outcome if you can't know that? Anyone see any difficulty if I promise Allie a big raise next year? Yeah, you could be wrong. The whole disappointment or the trust. You told me that this was going to happen.
So just to be clear, are you promising a big raise next year? Call me.
Yeah, that if I don't control the outcome, like in my doctoral student, people were telling her what the outcome of her test was or that she shouldn't worry. Yeah, the whole trust issue that if I assert things are going to happen that don't, I'm now viewed as untruthful. People get disappointed, and there's that lack of trust. So Lisa, let's stop Allie and others' wheels from spinning and talk about how do we reassure ourselves and other adults as well as the kids that are in our lives.
Ali, I'm really sorry. We actually snuck in another definition slide here before we actually get into the concrete parts. So you can blame what is reassurance? It's the feeling. It's an actual internal feeling of being reassured and of having our confidence restored, of having apprehensions dispelled. So reassurance involves saying or doing something that makes someone feel less worried. So essentially, reassurance is simply showing someone, either through nonverbal or verbal communication, that they're not alone. And this in itself is going to fundamentally change the experience that they're going through for them. The very fact that they know they're not alone and that someone is there to care for them and to hold their hands and to love them as they go through it is going to change that whole negative experience in such fundamental ways that it will change their response to the world or the experience.
So one of the things that we can do for kids is to actually check in on what they're thinking and feeling. That if it's about COVID, kids have heard a lot of things online, or they've heard things on the news, or they've gotten things from their friends. And if you've ever been around children for even a day, you know that some of the things they think are true or that they hear from their friends are not true. And what comes to mind for me is the story of a young boy who was about a second grader, and they asked him if he would be willing to give his sister blood because she needed a transfusion and his blood was of the same type. So he readily agreed to help his sister, and they put him on the gurney and they took him in and they hooked him up, and he started to exchange blood. And then he asked the doctor, "How long until I die?" And the doctor said, "What do you mean?" He assumed that he was giving all his blood to his sister. Nobody had undertaken the time and the effort to find out, wait a minute, what's your understanding of this? And makes me even more amazed that the little guy was like, do that for my sister? Sure, I'll give up my life for her. So we can reassure kids by, one, bringing the topic out. And I noticed that you seem a little quiet today. Are there things bothering you? Or what have you heard about this issue? And what are the things about which you're worried? Or letting them know that if you do have concerns about something, it's okay to talk about them, and I can help you find answers. And if I don't know those answers, I can work with other people to help you find the answers you need that will help you feel better about this situation. And just checking in with them, how are you feeling? Realizing that sometimes, depending on the age of the child, it's difficult for them to articulate what they're feeling. You may need to help them with, so are you feeling anxious about Grammy or Grandpa, that kind of thing.
I just want to pipe in with that, though. I have noticed with my own younger kids that it does take them a while to answer the questions, but you can't jump in and answer it for them. Like, you have to be able to be comfortable with the uncomfortable silence for a minute. And sometimes they may start with, I don't know, but then it'll start to unravel and their thoughts and feelings will actually come out if you wait.
And sometimes, Allie, kids, you've got second and fourth grade, it isn't always going to be verbal. They might draw a picture or use art or other ways of expression that help them articulate in a painting or story or play acting the kinds of things that they're concerned about. Anyone else want to chime in on their experience with that? Thank you, Allie. Okay, another thing that you can do is really to validate whatever they're feeling and whatever their concerns are, it's okay. Knowing that some of kids' concerns could be very realistic. Grandpa's in a nursing home and I'm concerned about his health, but you can validate that they have that concern, and they could be about, as you mentioned earlier, family members, pets. Will I play with my friends again, or future events? And work to understand their concerns, and then for example, if it's about something like returning to school, you can't necessarily assure them and say, we are going back to total normal in 3 weeks. You don't know that. What you can do is reassure them by saying there are people at school and people in your life who are working hard to make the school as safe as it can be, and they're concerned about your safety and your teacher's safety. So what you can do is reassure them knowing there are people there working on the things that you're concerned about. I'm not making you a promise of when or that it'll be perfect in the future, because things are outside of our control, but I can reassure you that there are people working on the things that you're concerned about. Those gestures that Lisa spoke about, you can model the behaviors that you want them to emulate. And going through this whole process, we all get concerned about things. As Mark Twain said, he spent his life worrying about things, some of which actually happened. So we are like the only species that can make ourselves literally sick by worrying about things that have not happened yet. So model a healthy approach. I'm worried about X, and so what I'm going to do is make sure that I do the things that are in my control to help make sure that the outcome is as positive as I can make it. And make them aware of strategies to reassure themselves. I don't know if you saw on CNN, but there was a video of a little 3-year-old girl skiing down a mountain, and she was verbalizing, okay, ice, I'm going over you. Okay, ice, I'm going around you. That she was talking herself down the mountain through that situation. And if it's about COVID, modeling and demonstrating safety procedures like hand sanitizer before you go in and wearing a mask, and the things that we know science tells us will help to keep us well, which is why I get frustrated when sometimes people don't model those things for children about how to keep themselves safe. I think kids need great examples of what they can become. And the fact that I wear a mask or use hand sanitizer and wash my hands doesn't mean I'm afraid of the virus any more than me wearing hot mitts means I'm afraid of the oven when I take something out. It just means I'm going to take the safety precautions I need to take to keep myself safe. If you know a child well and they've been through a situation before, kids love family stories. So I'm thinking, and Allie, you and I have not talked about this, but to put you on the spot, is there a time before when your family had a difficulty and they made it through that they were worried about it? Was it moving or?
Yeah. Actually, I'm glad you said that. It was moving. We moved recently and it was a big upheaval. And that would be a good reminder for them.
Yes, so reminding them of those situations. Remember before when we were anxious about leaving our apartment and moving to the new house, what would the room be like? Would there be neighborhood kids to play with? All those things. And we made it through that. You know, we went and visited the house. So think about the actions that we took to reassure ourselves about the new place. Or remember when the tree fell on the part of the house and we were worried, we all got out. We called the repairman and he came and he fixed the house, and now you'd never know, except we remember that. And just explain that the way we are as human beings, we get anxious when we're in an unfamiliar situation, but there are things that we can do by thinking about how we've handled it before and being with others that help us know that we're not alone. And finally, Lisa and I felt it was important that when we explain things, that we use as much factual information as we can. And Lisa's website and the CDC, if it's about COVID, has that kind of information. So getting actual information is important to know that there are sources and information out there, but also given the recent increase in violence against people of Asian descent, to know that when we're upset or feeling anxious, there's that tendency to blame others, and that no people cause this virus, just like if it was a situation of a tree falling on the house, nobody caused that. It happened, and we're not going to blame other people. Oh, the power company should have cut that. It happened, it fell down. There are people who are working to find solutions to keep us safe. Or as Mr. Rogers pointed out, in any bad situation, look for the helpers. There are always helpers. So Lisa, with those strategies, how does reassurance change our sense of well-being? And I think you're on mute.
So I was, thank you about that. Children can really learn to manage their worries and their fears and their anxieties in healthy ways with a little bit of reassurance from a trusted adult. And actually, those are the skills we want to teach them. We don't want to take their worries away from them, their fears away from them, and their anxiety away from them, because when they're grown up and when they're adults, they've got to have these strategies for managing these negative emotions themselves. So when we provide reassurance as a trusted adult, it helps the children have a sense of independence and competence, because they're actually learning to own their own narrative and to become agents of their own being. So when we reassure them that it's going to be okay, it validates everything that they're feeling. It empowers them to understand what they can control and can't control. And it comforts them primarily to know that they're not alone and they don't have to go through the situation alone. So at the end of the day, reassurance really gives people hope and gives children hope that the future is actually quite positive and worth looking forward to. So just to go back and to talk about some things that we covered, we can provide reassurance through language. Only offer promises you can keep, as Irv explained so nicely. Allow students to express themselves, however badly, when they can't explain their worries. Empathize with the child. Tell the child, I know you're sad, or I can see how worried you are, or I understand why you're feeling this way. And when you empathize with the way they're feeling, you're acknowledging that their feelings are right and that they don't need to feel shame or guilt for what they're experiencing as a natural consequence of a difficult situation. If they don't have the words for their feelings, help them notice, label, and accept their emotions. If, for example, you see a child who's crying, who's very young, give them the language. I can see that you're very sad. So give them language, because language empowers all of us. Similar to only offering promises you can keep, only offer certainty when it's real. And I think it was Ali who said, sometimes listen without saying anything, just be present, because your presence, the presence of a trusted adult, is probably the best thing that you can give anyone who's hurting. And in some, reassure through behaviors we model. I know sometimes in schools we're told we shouldn't touch children, and I know there are all kinds of issues related to it about gender or age, etc. But I'm a firm believer that a gentle touch at the right time by the right person works miracles for somebody who's in a bad place. A gentle touch on the shoulder, on the back, on the hand can take a miserable day and turn it into something so much better. Be present in the moment. So I know we're all really busy, but I'm going to give an example of, can I use you as an example of, Irv wasn't always present when we were putting this session together. And I felt terrible. I thought he was disinterested. He didn't want to go through the presentation with me, that there was something wrong with me. But it was really, he was just so busy and I didn't know it. But as soon as he was present, it just changed my whole perspective of myself and of the presentation. Him being present changed the experience for me. And you can do that for a child. Be present in the moment when you can see they're not in a good place. Give the child the space to also be present. Not every child wants someone right there in their face all the time. Allow the child to have his, her, or their emotions. Let them cry. Let them be sad. Let them be worried. It's all okay. These are all natural things that we have to learn to manage as adults. Don't take their emotions away from them. Don't make them feel bad about their emotions. They've got to learn to process them. Unless the child's emotions are such that their behavior is out of control and they're a danger to themselves or others around them. So if you see some child or young adult or a teenager possibly being verbally or physically aggressive towards another, that's when you should intervene, look at their behavior and determine the appropriate next steps. And like I said before, the presence of a trusted adult is the most important thing that you can do. Stay with them or tell them through your body language that you're there for them if and when they need you. And all of these small actions of reassurance are going to help the child or the young adult in ways that you can't imagine. But I promise you, I can assure you that they will help the child. I don't know how, but I know they will.
Okay, now we'd like to give you a chance to talk with each other about some of the ideas to which you've been exposed. In the handouts, there was a case study. We're going to put it into the chat, and because it's only 2 paragraphs, if you don't have access to the chat or the handouts, I'm going to read you this situation. And before I start reading, know that you can add whatever details to the story that you need to choose a course of action. This is really about thinking about what we talked about for strategies and then applying them. At the beginning of the school year, Mina was your average student. She was generally polite and appeared to enjoy a small group of friends. You often saw them kidding with each other in the corridor and eating lunch together while engaged in conversation. During class, she participated without prompting, and her grades reflected her commitment to her work. She seldom forgot her homework. Over the past month, you've seen a change in Mina. She's withdrawn. She no longer laughs or shares lunch times with her friends. She was confrontational with you when you inquired about this. During class, you've seen her attention wandering, and she seems easily frustrated, disinterested, and unmotivated. You know that she's missing her grandmother, who's in ill health and in a nursing home, and you suspect that she's worried about losing her. You also know that her mother's been laid off from work as the consequence of COVID-19. We'd like you to divide up into breakout groups. Allie's going to divide you up for about 10 minutes to discuss, given this situation about Mina, how might you reassure her? You can't promise her the outcome about her grandmother's health or her mother's job, but in the meantime, how might you reassure her? So Allie, let's break into small groups for about 10 minutes and then come back and finish up.
Okay, so what's going to happen is you'll get a pop-up on your screen that says, I'm inviting you to join room 4, room 5, whatever. Just hit yes. You'll go in with a couple of friends. And then when the 10 minutes is up, we'll give you a heads up. You'll see a message, and then it will automatically pop you back here. If you get lost or you lose your connection, just go to the original Zoom link and come back in. Here we go. Welcome back, everybody.
Yeah, welcome back. And in the time that we have about 10 minutes left, we don't have time for every group to share, but is there any group that would be willing to share what you came up with for ways you could reassure Mina? Anyone want to unmute themselves?
I guess I'll go.
Thank you, Lisa.
We had some great conversations. It was kind of interesting because we had children from kindergarten to 2nd grade and high school. and just, being there for support and just knowing that, there might be little things that that student could do for their grandmother, whether it's making homemade items that they could send into the nursing home to kind of still have some kind of connection. Not pressuring for that student to have to or want to talk to them about their feelings about the job loss and their family, but maybe, giving some ideas of things that they could do at home to kind of help out or alleviate a little bit of stress for both people, parents and the children. So it was kind of great conversations, especially with the difference of ages.
Yeah, those are great ideas. Another group, did you come up with some different ideas using the same case study?
One thing we talked about was not knowing the age of this child and stuff, but we thought maybe start with reaching out to the mother to see if she's seeing these behaviors at home too, to kind of get some insight. And along the lines of the grandmother, we mentioned about like drawings or letters, or even see if we could possibly set up like a video chat kind of thing, so that the grandmother could see her at school and she could see her grandmother, obviously depending on the grandmother's condition, that kind of thing, but just to have that connection with her. So those were a couple of things that we came up with.
Those are wonderful ideas. And I think, to reinforce the point that Lisa made, the importance of just having another person there, it's was amazing, some of the responders in the hospital, that when people did die of COVID, they would be there to hold their hand in a safe way and just be with them. They obviously couldn't assure a different outcome, but they were there with them. So I think for that child to be able to make something or send a letter or send a picture or a video conference would be very important. One more group want to share?
One thing that I mentioned in our group was being able to share some of your own experiences that were similar for the student. I work with high school students, and if you're comfortable, I suppose, with your student and sharing things that have happened in your own life, so that they can see that other people are going through similar situations that they're going through.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it is important that kids of all ages and adults realize that they need great examples of how they can handle those kinds of things. So if we never talk about the difficulties that we face, then they don't realize that's a normal part of life. Allie, go ahead, Kathy.
I was just going to say, as I shared in my group working with kindergartners, one of my kiddos asked me last week why I had been out in January for a week. And I said, well, I had COVID, so I was sick and I needed to get better. And instead of the reaction being, oh, whatever, or good, his reaction was, you are freaking me out. You are just freaking me out right now. So I didn't dig into it. Mom was sitting right there on the other side of the Zoom call, but I think while it's great to share, sometimes you have to consider the audience, and I wasn't prepared for this little 5-year-old to not be able to make the leap from she was sick, she's well. So some people do recover. So
well, most people do recover. So
right.
That's when I'd be worried about the child's inference that if someone gets sick, they're going to die.
Right.
When, and every life is valuable. But
right.
out of the 27 million people who've had it, most people do recover.
So it opened up a large list of questions for me about information in that child's home. But it also made me think about how I would answer that question in the future.
Good. Thank you, Kathy. Allie, you had a question.
So I did have a question, and this discussion out after the breakout rooms has helped me with my question, which was one of your slides said, make the students aware of strategies to reassure themselves, which I liked what Lisa was saying of, they're practicing skills that they're going to need again someday and for the rest of their life, and how to manage worries. But I just wanted some ideas on like, what can I teach the kids of ways that they can calm themselves. And then I'll just share one. I'll share one of my own answers, which was my daughter was like bursting into tears a lot lately. She's 9, and she doesn't like to talk to me about feelings. And so I said, you know what, honey, let's make a picture, right, of your support network. It doesn't have to be me. It can be whoever. So she goes in the middle, right? I'm sure you guys have done this kind of thing with your students. And then the next ring out is your family and your best friends who you feel like you could talk to that isn't me. And then the next ring is other adults that you trust, like maybe it's a neighbor or a teacher or whatever. And I said, you need to start calling them, and if you want to call one of those people, I will set it up for you. And shockingly, she did. And so she started making a bunch of calls and setting up her own support network. So that was really helpful. But if anybody else has suggestions of like what you can teach kids in terms of, I don't know, is it affirmations or what? Because I barely know how to deal with my own worries, right?
But Allie, I love that idea of having kids actually map out their support network. Lisa, did you want to add some things to that? And then we can open it up for others.
Yeah, Ali, I love your example. And I think your approach was really quite spot on, because I think what you did was with your body language, with your nonverbal cues, you were telling your daughter that you were going to be there with her through this. So she's not alone. The first thing that we want to know, that we want to feel, is that we're not alone. And the second thing that we need is someone to help us map a path out of it. And we usually do that with our 7% verbal skills. So what can we do next? And then do it with them, and then have them do it alone. So exactly what you did. And of course, there's so much contextual differences in every situation, but really the first thing you can do is let them know they're not alone and that you're there for them, because that's going to change everything for them. And their level of anxiety is going to drop down really quickly. They're going to feel so much safer and more secure and loved and worthy. That's the first thing you have to do. And then the second thing is, when they're at that place where their brains can actually process language, is actually walk them through what they're going to do. If they have the ideas, all the better, and then ask them to do it. So I think what you did, what you're doing is perfect with your daughter.
Anyone else have some other strategies they could share with Allie about teaching kids to self-regulate? And
so I have sort of a unique situation. My parents both grew up with worriers and were determined not to do the same. So I grew up with two very wonderful parents who were strong and never worried. If I was not home at 2 a.m., I'm not saying my mom didn't do a car ride to see if I was at my boyfriend's house, but that was just to make sure she knew where I was, and then she went back home and went to bed. So, so a lot of this is foreign to me. I don't worry about things. I just, I do a lot of listening. I loved what is it Schultz? I'm sorry, she was in my breakout room and she spoke up about the listening and relating her personal stories, which I think is super helpful, as long as I know someone else said their audience, they had to be careful with the kindergartner because they thought, oh my goodness, that you could have died. And I found that when I told my high schoolers that I had COVID in December, that they were alarmed. And then when I was fine, they looked at me funny. My own daughter thought I was going to die when I told her. So, and she's in her 20s. So it's careful to know your audience, I guess, is really important. And to, while you're actively listening, make sure that you are gauging their nonverbal cues, as Lisa would say, so that you're seeing how they are taking what information you're giving them, and then sort of feeding off of that. But whatever confidence that you can find in yourself, even if you have to fake your confidence so that they aren't picking up nonverbal cues from you that make them worry more. I don't know if that helps or not.
Yep. Thanks, Liz. That's great. Thanks for sharing. Lisa.
So coming full circle, here we are, we're 5:31, 5:30. We started off by talking about our goals for the session, and we hope we in some way met them for you. So we hope now that you have the share an understanding with us on what reassurance is. We hope that you felt that you truly did explore why students and adults need reassurance, especially during challenging times, and that you're now aware of and can possibly recognize how verbal and nonverbal communication impacts your sense of safety and wellness in the world. And finally, what we all did together at the end was discuss strategies for offering reassurance during challenging times. And we obviously wish we had longer to talk about this, but now it's 5:30 and our time is up, and it's up to you now to make your own way back into the world and to provide reassurance for yourself and for the people with whom you work and your loved ones. So namaste, and thank you for joining us.
And Allie, you were gonna, I don't know if you've done it yet, put the certificate in the chat for attendance.
I will do that right now. You guys can download it right from there, but I will also email it to you after the class if,
Please do.
yeah, because not everyone
Thanks.
wants to do this.
Great.
It is on its way.
Thank
This
you,
was
Lisa.
wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that I need to be present when we plan these things more.